Anyway, I've got some slides I want to go through, and mainly just some things to talk from, and then if there are questions at the end, we can answer some. I'll be glad to answer whatever questions I can. But I want to go through some things about the permitting background of permitting, and contrary to popular belief, all the permitting rules are not created by Alabama Power. So I'll get into some of that a little bit, and we get some funny stuff sometimes. We get some funny calls. A lot of those have to do with floodwaters. And I had a call from a guy last week that was inquiring about his property, and every bit of his property is in our flood. I mean, in fact, the road going to his house is in our flood. He wanted to know how often we flooded. And I said, well, and let me back up here too. We don't, all the flood control has nothing to do with shoreline management. That's on hydro generation. But I thought I would dance a little bit, and I said, well, it's predicated on rain. Flood has to do with how much it rains. He said, well, when do y'all do that? When do we make it rain? I don't know, but anyway, it's some funny stuff. And people are people, and that's what makes life go round. But anyway, as Nicole said, Nicole and I work in shoreline management. She takes care of just about everything on Neely Henry unless she needs some help, and then she helps us on Logan Martin. And we go through our mission statement. To protect and enhance the scenic, recreational, and environmental values of the reservoirs while protecting property rights of Alabama Power Company and FERC. I'll talk about that in a minute. Project plans consistent with our hydro license and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers general permitting. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about that in a second. There are 6 offices that we operate out of. We've got an office on Smith, that's on the Black Warrior, and then of course Weiss, and then the Upper Coosa is managed out of the Neely Henry Dam at Raglan. That office covers Neely Henry and Logan Martin, and then we bounce on down to Lay and Mitchell, the Lower Coosa, that's managed out of our Clanton office, and then we've got an office at Harris and for Lake Martin. All right, I'll talk a little bit about our permitting program. So when the reservoirs were backed up, Alabama Power bought the actual property. So from the shoreline on in, and level for Neely Henry is 508, correct? 508 in, actually Alabama Power owns that, and then we bought the rights to flood up to a certain point, and that varies depending on where you are on the lake. So the closer you are to the dam, the less floodwaters they are. The more you go up to the next one, the higher they are. So in the shoreline management program is a result of our FERC license. FERC is a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and so we have to have a license to operate the hydroelectric system. Part of that licensing includes a shoreline management program. So that's where they come in and have jurisdiction over what we do and some of the limits and things like that as far as permitting goes. And then the other entity is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they have jurisdiction over this under the Clean Water Act and the Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act. And if you'll see on the slide right there, that's reservoirs on the Coosa River only. Anybody know why? Anybody have a clue why? So in the registry of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Coosa River is still considered to be a navigable river. So if anybody's got a boat that can go over one of these dams, I don't want to be in it. But so that's where that part of their jurisdiction comes in there, and then of course the Clean Water Act comes in as well. So some good news, some things that have changed over the years. And Nicole, you may be able to answer this. When did the PGT process start? Wasn't too many years ago, right?
No, I think 2016.
Okay, prior to 2016, any permitting had to be approved by the Corps of Engineers. And that just added another layer to try to get a permit approved. It stretched it out. It's cumbersome. And so Alabama Power reached an agreement with the Corps of Engineers that we can permit things in our own offices on given certain limits. And this is for residential permitting. Any type of commercial permit, non-residential permit, that has to go through the federal side. We start it, but then they come get involved, and that has to go through them. But as far as residential permitting, like your typical boathouses, piers, bank stabilization like seawalls and riprap, we're able to permit that as long as we stay within those guidelines, and it doesn't have to go to the Corps. And that helps everybody out. It helps us out. It helps the Corps out. I mean, it takes a lot of work off of them, and ultimately it helps the people that are requesting a permit to not have to go through all those steps. So, but the limiting on the permitting guidelines, like the square footage that you're able to have and how far out you can go and all that, is determined from FERC and from the Corps of Engineers. It's not just Alabama Power coming out and saying this is all we're going to allow. It has to do with those two entities that have jurisdiction over the rivers. Under the programmatic permitting that we have with the Corps, there are structure size limits, and again, that varies by lake. So Neely Henry and Logan Martin are the same. The distance out's different, but the size is the same. Any type of activity has to have approval from Alabama Power Company in order for this to work. So the only thing that essentially doesn't have to be permitted is painting and staining. Anything else, any type of maintenance or new construction, repair work, anything like that outside of painting and staining and cleaning has to be permitted. The seawall controls, that's part of that, and then like I said, it varies from lake to lake. Just to kind of give you an idea of what's happened, this permitting process started in '92. So you can see on the slide up there, from '92 to '17, which is the last data I can pull, those large numbers over there, those are total properties permitted in that span of time. There's 2,959 on Neely Henry, and then in parentheses, that's how many permits we issued in the calendar year of 21. So of course, the largest one that we deal with is Lake Martin, and that's a very large lake, obviously. A little bit of information about recreation. Again, that's part of our licensing through FERC to provide recreational spots. The whole premise behind that in a I guess a high-level overview is to provide public access. That's what our shoreline management program is required to provide public access so that everybody can use water, whether you have places on the water or not. So we have 64 recreational sites across our reservoir system, and we're in the process of rebranding all of that under the preserves. So that when you see that branding, that's what that's coming from. You see the list of things there. It's on the Upper Coosa, specific to Alabama, or the Neely Henry Lake is 10 Island, and then the tail race on the east and the west side of the dam at Neely Henry. In fact, on the east side of the dam, they just added a new bathroom there about 6 months ago, I guess, was it? So the day use parks, there's picnic tables, grills, pavilions, fishing facilities, and the operations, the hours operated vary. We do staff those. Most of the time we use contractors to alternate staffing out to make sure it's managed and kept clean and presentable and something that somebody would want to come to. We also have physically disabled hunting areas, and that's in partnership with the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and those are located at Harris, Smith, and Jordan. The Renew Our Rivers, that, of course, COVID's changed a lot of things and got some things, the brakes tapped on that a lot, but that's back up and going. And I think the Renew Our Rivers event for Neely Henry is September the 26th. Does that sound right? Okay, so is somebody in here involved in that? Okay, all right, so that is back up and rolling. And then another thing, part of our licensing requirement is public education and communication. Part of it is what we're doing here tonight, and it's good to be able to get back out and meet with people. We haven't been able to do that for a while. So we do come to local organizations. We've got our website that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in just a second. And we're starting to kick back off the open house public education format and then the boat show. We were supposed to attend that this past year, and then of course there was another outbreak, an uptick in the COVID thing, and so we stopped that. But I think by next year that will be back on for us. The Smart Lakes app, hopefully you're familiar with that. If you don't have that app, I would encourage you to download that app. There's some information over here on it. If you go to your whatever device you have and just search Smart Lakes, you should be able to find it. But there's a lot of good information there. It shows water levels, the turbines, if they're running, or the floodgates are open, it gives you an idea. It gives you a water level for the day. That water level is taken at the dam. So it may not be consistent, especially in Neely Henry if you're above Minnesota Bend, especially if there's a lot of fluctuation in water, a lot of rain, things like that. But I would encourage you to go get that and stay tuned to that. Our website, apcshorelines.com, if there's permitting requests to be had, that's where we encourage people to go to that website and submit your request there. There's also a lot of other information that's available on the website.
You can also do that from the app, right?
Yes,
Just
well,
like that.
yeah, the app's supposed to be working, but I'm not sure. There's a way to go to the app and request a permit on there, but I'm not sure how that's working yet. It's supposed to be worked out, but I'm not confident in it. That website right there, we know that it works. When somebody submits that request, it immediately routes to us. In fact, Nicole gets that and then sends it to somebody immediately. So that's the quickest way to get a response involved to get a permit is go to that website. That's kind of what it looks like when you go there. Those are 3 different screenshots from the website. But it's not working. So the bottom left corner right there, that's when you first go to the website, that's what it looks like when you select Neely Henry. And then when you go to the permits tab to request a new permit, that information on the bottom right corner, that's what starts it. So if somebody's asking about that on the permitting information, it asks for a lot of stuff.
That's what I was about to
Yeah, primarily what we need is your name and contact information, email and phone number.
And the lake address. I
And
think.
the lake address.
As much as you know. I
Yep.
know there's some properties that don't have addresses. GPS coordinates will get me there. So if y'all have GPS coordinates, that's the best
Yep.
information that we use.
Delineate between your home address, your primary address, and your link address, because a lot of times those are different. The rest of the information that asks for on there, PPIN numbers, GPS coordinates, if you have a good address, we don't need those. I mean, all the rest of the stuff we'll get as we go through the permitting process. I believe that's all I got. Any questions? Anybody want to buy that?
Could you cover who's grandfathered in? I mean, so we've always been told if you had an enclosed boathouse or in a storm situation, those people could rebuild. So that, I mean, I know that going from the subcontractors to Nicole taking over, there's been some
Right, I can address
discrepancies.
that.
And
So what we call those legacy structures. If they were, if they're there under some other provision before these guidelines are in place, as long as you maintain it, you get to keep it. Now, if it does get destroyed, a storm comes and takes it all away, when you build back, you've got to build back inside the current guidelines.
So storm comes, takes it out, you're not grandfathered in?
Well, you can't build back
just can't
the same. You
rebuild
got to
that
build
same
back
size.
under the current guidelines, right? So if you had something that's enclosed at 1,500 square feet and it gets taken away, you've got to come back in and open boathouse with 1220 max. And let me back up here. If you read through the guidelines, and I'm speaking on residential permitting guidelines, you'll read in there that the max you can have is 1,220 square feet if you have 100 feet of shoreline. So in order to get 1,220, you have to have 100 feet of linear shoreline. But those are guidelines. It doesn't mean everybody gets that. It just means that's the max that could be granted. So every situation is a little unique. Most of the time, it's like that.
What are we calling destroyed? I mean, pilings are still. I know that I pulled a permit in the past, and they went off the pylons that were still in the river versus.
It would just have to be a case-by-case basis.
There's nothing black and white.
Yeah.
So it's a case by case on that.
Yeah.
Typically, if pilings are still there, you can build back, but majority of the time you can't.
Yeah, the hard answer is no, but
Yeah.
you just never know.
Gotcha. And as far as regular maintenance, as far as changing deck boards out, or like you said earlier, staining decks. I heard somebody bring up at one of the meetings that they had been stopped from staining their deck or their pier.
Painting, staining, cleaning, you don't have to have a permit for that.
Okay.
Everything else, any kind of board replacement you do.
So if I have one board to replace, I need to get a permit?
Well, you need to call us.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah,
There
you need to call us.
Some of the guys that would do the inspections, I know at Wise Lake, especially, I think y'all contract those out. They suggested that you could repair up to a certain percent without having to get a repair permit.
Well, here's what we say. You need to call us. You need to ask for it. And here's why I say that. Is there a time when we would come and say, yeah, you're okay? We might do that. Or we might go ahead and write a permit. We might waive a repair fee. But again, you need to call us. And here's the response to that. If you have one rotten board, you're probably going to have some more. I mean, very seldom does just one. It happens, I get it. But most of the time, if one of them or two or three are riding, the rest of them are too. But just call us, and we handle that on a case-by-case basis. Anything else?
I've got a question on, we don't have a lot of islands in our lake, but we do have some. Geese roost on them, you know, we've got all kinds of different migratory birds and that sort of thing. My question is, who is responsible for those islands? Because sometimes folks will cut trees on them, sometimes they'll have fires on them. I've never seen anything posted before, and do we call the Water Patrol? Do we call y'all? Do we call Rainbow City? Do we call Southside? Do we call Oaks Bluff?
I would start by calling us.
Okay.
Most of the
Most of
islands
those
are there
are
rules
ours
and
here.
regulations
Most of
covering
those islands are
islands?
owned by Alabama Power,
Okay.
and you're not supposed to touch anything. Those are not anybody's to touch. So if
But you can pull your boat up, you can hang
Yes,
out.
normal use, just like you would on a shoreline.
Okay.
Yes,
But
but as far as
cutting
cutting
trees,
things,
anything like that is not,
Fires.
Right.
No fires.
it should be.
So that is a regulation.
But
that
if
we
it's
see
something that
that,
somebody's doing, if you're seeing somebody build a fire, then call Marine
Marine police.
Right.
But
Okay.
if you have
Okay.
questions about something, then call us.
Okay, good.
yeah, and most of them, there aren't hardly any privately owned islands on Neely Henry, right?
There's
No.
a few.
There are not many.
But not many.
Yeah.
These are the public islands,
Yeah.
obviously, the ones that I was talking about, because folks have asked me before, you know, I've seen people out there at night with fires, and what if it burns the island down, and you've got heron nests and all
Right,
kinds of
yeah.
stuff like that. What, is there a possibility that y'all could post some of those larger islands to let people?
I'll find out.
kinda
I mean,
know?
I've made a note of that. That would be from our environmental group, right? I'll ask about
Okay,
that.
that'd be great, because it comes up periodically, folks. will
But there are
ask me.
some that are privately
Yeah,
owned.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, anything out of normal, I mean, they're there to use, but to use like you would normally any other shoreline.
Okay.
Can you go over some of the other boathouse requirements of 1,200 square feet?
As a rule, in order to get that, you have to have a minimum of 100 feet of shoreline. And if you have 200 feet of shoreline, that means you get 1440. So it's the limits are 1220. It cannot be more than 50 feet from the shoreline for Neely Henry. That's, yeah, I know that's right. So 50 feet out and 1220. There's a 15-foot setback rule on either property line. So if you imagine the property line extending out in the lake, you've got to stay 15 feet off of that. And if there's if it's in a slough, we want to maintain, it's commonly referred to as the third rule. Don't take more than a third of the slough. So, but again, that depends on the slough. The intent of boats through, but you know, the narrower that slough is, the tighter that gets. So, I think that's prime. Does that answer what you're looking for? And some people, it does come up sometimes. Well, I've got 2 lots. Can I increase that size? You can't do that. It's the intent is 1220 per property. Yes, sir.
Is there a place to find out, I don't think Smart Lakes helps in this regard, like the last, not this year, but 2 years prior, where I am on the lake, there was a drawdown such that I had mud out beyond my dock, so I had 50 feet of mud out, which was fine, give me a chance to clean up and all that stuff, but I didn't know when it was coming. It would be nice to know when those kinds of things are coming. Is there any way to know when something like that's happening?
On the drawdown,
Yeah.
well, if it happened in the past couple of years, it was probably flood. It was just flood control. There is a scheduled drawdown for Neely Henry in fall of 23. So not this next fall, but the following fall. So that will be announced. I can tell you it usually happens in October. The dates are not locked in yet because they'll wait till it gets a little closer so they'll know, have some data points on flood and what the forecasts are and things like that. But as far as the scheduled drawdown like that, it'll be on our website. We'll post something on Smart Lakes, and usually we put something in publications around here.
We
And we can let you
really
guys know.
communicate that out when we know. In fact, that was one of my talking items later on tonight, to let you all know that, in fact, it has been scheduled previously years. We've requested that, and the power companies worked with us to allow that to happen on our lake, and now they've kind of made it a standard schedule every 5 years.
Every 5 years,
I
right.
think. And So we're due up on next year.
Right.
And we'll communicate it to y'all.
And that's typically about a 2-week period.
Yes, correct. Yes, sir.
And how
I
far,
want to come back to that too. Good way.
and how far will it be drawn down?
I think it's 5 feet. I don't hold me to
Usually
that.
it's about like 502, something like that.
Yeah, so that's about 7 feet, then,
Yeah.
6 or 7 feet. And speaking of that,
And river, or?
It's at the dam, that's.
it's at the dam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, before I get off that, so when that starts coming around, and of course, if you're building a structure in the water, the builders won't water because they would rather drive the post versus digging hose, which is, we like that better, and it's better anyway. It's sturdier. If people are interested in getting a permit for that, don't wait till the week before the drawdown to try to get it, because it just, those are some things we battle on Logan Martin. We manage that out of our office, and so there is a drawdown there every year. Obviously, that it's Neely Henry's a basin lake, Logan Martin is not. Well, every year around February or March, everybody starts scrambling to get a permit. Water's about to come back up. Water's about to come back up. You want to say, well, it's been down since October, but you just can't say that. But anyway, so that permitting process really, it gets to a point when it's at some point for us there, when they say, can you get it before the water comes back up? It's just a no. It's just too late. So anyway, my point is, get the word out. I mean, be early on this. The permit's good for a year. A couple other, just a permitting notes. If you get a permit for something, especially if it's a new build, that permit fee for new construction is $400. It doesn't matter how many things you build new. So it's good for a year. So if you think you can get something done, or you think you're planning on it, go ahead and put it on the permit. And if you don't do it, there's no harm, no foul. After a year, the permit expires, and if you don't get it done, and you want to do it again, you just have to have it permitted. So I try to have that conversation with people every time before we finalize a permit. And I should have another thing about the permitting process, and maybe it'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, whatever you think you can do, go ahead and get it permitted. And because, like I said, it's good for a year. I think that's everything. Oh, I know what it was. So another thing about permitting, back to your question. So there are environmentally sensitive shorelines in certain areas. Some, if you've had any experience with us about that, I want to talk about that in just a minute. That's all managed out of our environmental department, and usually it's one of 3 things. It's either wetlands, threatened and endangered species, or cultural resources, cultural artifacts. That's usually what one of the 3 things are. There's not a lot of threatened and endangered species on Neely Henry. There was some kind of snails discovered in some of the tributaries about 6 months ago, so hopefully that doesn't spread. If you have any experience with people on Mitchell, you may be familiar with that, where they have to go in and relocate all these snails. We don't have to deal with that. But on those environmental layers, once we get a request, it has to go through the environmental department to clear it. They don't tell us what the layers are for good reason, because if there's some kind of cultural resources out around your area and that gets out, you'll have every idiot known to man trying to dig around your property. We just don't want that going on. No one wants that. So they don't tell us what the environmental layers are, but it has to go through their group. And if there is a sensitive layer, again, it depends on what it is. But most of the time, it doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean you can't do anything. You just make a limit on the construction, or it may definitely limit sometimes on what happens in the lake bed or on the shoreline. The one thing that we have to deal with on Logan Martin, you don't in Neely Henry, is the Monsanto, the PCB issue coming out of Anniston that feeds through Chocolaca Creek into Logan Martin. There are big limits on that about what people can do. Like you can't dig anything in the lake bed. You drive a post, you can't dig a hole to put in it. And the good news is those areas are shrinking. So the less the lake bed's disturbed, the more it leaches on, those things leach out. So good news for Neely Henry, we don't have to deal with that.
On the drawdown, can you remove some dirt or just filter in and shallow enough?
It has to be permitted, a dredge.
Yeah, it's permitted, but you can do that.
As a rule of thumb, I mean, I'm going to speak in generality, so every case is unique. As a rule of thumb, silt, you can't take the lake bed out, but silted in, usually you can take that out. And that permitting process is, there has to be a spoil site, it's got to be approved if it's not previously approved and all that. So that can get kind of lengthy. So if something's going on with that, get that one done.
Friend that's just bought a property and just has a piece on old pier. For him just to take that.
One more thing.
Okay.
Not to do with building or anything. Just north of Southside Bridges, there's a huge mass of floating grass.
Mhm.
It was on one side of the river one day, the wind changed on the other side of the river. Last year, we had the same thing float into our slough, and it stayed there for a good while, and then it floated out. Is there any way that the power company
Yes.
can help get rid of that? Other than spraying?
Do what?
Other than spraying?
So the same people that do that would be the ones to talk to about that. On the website, it's on the app, aquatic plants. It'll be listed under aquatic plants.
I've done it before, and I've reported it.
Okay, okay. And there's also the Loch Ness Monster up there.
He's green too.
I went by it last weekend. I'll make a note and talk to the guy, see what I can find
It's
out.
just north of the south side of the bridge.
Okay, yeah. I know what you're talking about. I actually live on Neely Henry, so I'm more familiar with this lake than I am Logan Martin, kind of. So as far as when it comes to the water, but I'll find out about that.
So if I got this right, you said that Alabama Power kind of owns the lake bed.
Correct.
And you manage that lake bed. But the property owners own the land, their land,
Right.
their structures, but then they own the structures that are on the water.
We allow them to build a structure
You
on our
allow
land,
them to
basically.
build,
Yes,
okay.
correct.
So let's just theoretically go to January of 2023, or no, let's say March of 2023. A big rain event is expected on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, when we have the biggest bass tournament we've ever nationally held on this lake.
Uh-huh.
And somebody decides to pull a switch to drop the lake and ruin every fish to be caught during that tournament for 4 days.
Right,
And the spawn that's going on at the same time.
right.
What goes into that decision? And who makes
First of
it?
all, that's on the hydro side. I mean,
Yeah, I
as
get
far as
that.
water levels and all
Right.
that, I can't speak intelligently to it because that's a totally different fish. But at the end of the day, it's about flood control.
Well, I get
So,
Is that
rain's gonna do
Alabama
what's
Power
gonna
or
do.
is that Corps of Engineering?
Some of both. All those entities work together. And again, I can't speak to that at all very much because I don't know. But I do know. Obviously, it has to do with flood,
Right.
and we can't stop the flood for the fish tournament. I mean,
Right.
that's me
Well, I get
talking.
that.
That's not the official response, but that's kind of how that works.
So that's why you're the drop of
Pardon me?
the drop of, because I came in late, I just wanted to understand. Dropping the feet from a maximum 5 feet is because of flood control north of us or south?
Well, here's what, again, I'm going to speak a little bit on the hydro side that I'm not a part of. But normally what happens, so flood control, everybody's familiar with Minnesota Bend, you know where that is? In Gadsden, the big 90-degree turn that water can't get through. So,
Is that a burial ground for Indians?
I don't know.
Because one of the Alabama Power Company lakes coming out.
I don't have any idea. I'm not even supposed to know it if I did. Couldn't tell you.
What
So-
you saying? It was on Swift Lake.
The only one I know where there's Indian burial grounds, that lady couldn't build her boathouse. That's on Logan Martin. So the way I understand it, that there's a bottleneck right there in water. So when flood waters come, they try to suck as much water out of that, lower the bottom side of Neely Henry on that down so that water can get through there to prevent flooding Gadsden. And that involves, of course, it's kind of weird because I refer to us, I live on Neely Henry, so we're a basin lake, so when floods come, where I am, it actually goes down, it drops, because the gates are open at Logan Martin, and it's just a big flow of water going down through there, but it's all trying to suck water out and manage the flow. And I know some people get upset with the flood and all that, at least, and I'm speaking this historically from my father, who was in this area when all these structures were, when the hydro system was put in. Prior to that, there was no control. At least now you know where it can flood to. That's good. And that sometimes that's not the answer that people want to hear, but at least you know where the flood is.
Well, they
Higher or lower? It can't be much
The
higher.
Corps of Engineers and the Alabama Power have approved a new water control mechanism for Neely Henry Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And on the prediction of rain, they can suck 90% of this reservoir practically dry. The National Weather Service says at best they could do is 50% accuracy on the prediction of a rainfall now.
Right.
Last May, during the Bassmasters Elite tournament, they dropped the water 5 feet in 24 hours. 3 of the bass guys got stuck behind my house. It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Somebody should have notified, like you, that we're running that big of a tournament, or us, the property owners. Because when you drop
Yeah.
it 5 foot to 502.5,
Yeah, I don't know. Again, that's on the hydro side. And I
you
could-
live on the lake.
I do.
I would be interested too.
You live on the
Yeah.
lake.
You live on this lake,
Yeah.
you might.
Well, I'm looking at it from, I'm assuming it all has to do with floodwaters, and whether there's a bass tournament going on or not, it doesn't stop the
Well,
rain.
get this.
So, I don't know.
At that time, Weiss Lake was full pool and never got into it.
Yeah, I cannot, I don't know the science behind it. But I remember when that happened, because I got out and did some work on my shoreline. All right, very good.
Thank you so
What do you
much.
call a wetland? What's your definition of wetlands?
So wetlands involve, wetlands on our environmental side are going to look at hydroponic soil activity. Some grasses are good, some grasses are bad. The alligator grass is bad. There's a willow weed or willow grass. It's good. So it's basically an invasive versus a non-invasive species.
Just have to come look at it.
Yes, they'll come look at it, and they're pretty good about getting out. If you got something you think's alligator grass, that the aquatic plants people, you can go submit a request there, and they'll come out and spray it.
But I can't change nothing, I can't dig nothing out of it, right?
Not until they look at it and see. Let them control that, but they do pretty good at that. And like these, I don't know what you call these elephant ear plants that you see people put out. That's very invasive. It's a bad thing, so they'll get rid of those too. Because people put those out for looks, and all of a sudden it just takes over. They go like monkey grass. So, but they're pretty good about responding and getting to that.
But if you are an existing member and you have paid, can y'all hear me? I stand by that, right? Okay. If your dues are paid up, you get a free license tag. Are we still doing that for you? Okay. Free license tag, right? So I encourage y'all to pay your dues up, get those going. 2022 are due in June. So if you're paid up and good, you get a free license tag. If you're a brand new member and you pay your dues, you get a license tag too. So you can put it on your car. I've got mine on the end of my boat dock, so it's kind of a cool thing. And as I said, we'll have shirts and caps and things for sale going forward to let you all know that. I mentioned about the dues and shirts and caps. We talked earlier about Renew Our River. That is scheduled. Again, it's tentative. Weather and other things can affect that, but it's scheduled for September 22nd through the 30th. So we'll get more information out as we get closer to that date. We also mentioned the drawdown that is scheduled. It's called a maintenance drawdown, and that's in the fall of 2023. As I mentioned earlier, that was a result of hours that we used to have on Neely Henry. The Lake Association would go to the power company every so often, and we were instrumental in getting that the water pull down so that we could do maintenance on our docks and our seawalls and that sort of thing. And I can't encourage you enough, if you got a plan to do something next year, get a contract early and get your permit started early. Another item that's coming up on July 16th, we will, after 2 years of not having one, we'll have a poker run again. Did any of y'all participate in the poker run 2 years ago? Y'all know what a poker run is? Oh, okay. Well, it's a fun thing. I don't know all the details. I didn't participate in it, other than my dock was used as a place for people to draw their cards and make a hand, and you put money. Who can explain that better than I can?
Do what?
The poker run, how does that work, real quick? It's a fundraiser that will be...
You give me all your money, and then I decide who wins.
Yeah.
So you go to 5 spaces. You start out, then you go to another boat dock, another boat dock, another boat dock, and you come back. You have 5 locations. You get a card in each location, I believe is how you do it. And you make the best hand wins
The pot.
Wins the pot.
So you pay an entry fee, you ante in, you get to spend the afternoon or half a day or however long on the lake going to these different locations at your own speed. It's not a speed contest, but you make your hand and you get to see folks and hang out on the lake. At the end of the day, you may have won the pot. So we are going to have